everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we are excited today. We have another author on the podcast. We love talking with authors on the pod. And today we have author Savannah Carlisle here, and her new book, debut novel, The Library of Second Chances, is coming out this week. And Savannah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Long-time listener, first-time guest.
I always love to hear that. And you think that people like even know who we are. Like, yay.
Feel like everybody knows who you are. I told my dad I was coming on this podcast, and he's very excited because he is a big Hallmark movie fan.
Ah, yeah. Well, you said in the dedication for your book, you
I
talked about your
did.
dad loving Hallmark
It's funny. People
movies.
talk about watching it with their mom. You think like that's the natural connection. My parents are still married. My mom is still around. My mom does not like Hallmark movies. So it has always been a me and my dad thing. My mom,
Aw.
it's not her thing at all at Christmas. She doesn't even sit in the room with us and watch them. She wants the thrillers, she wants the dead body in the
Yeah,
basement, that kind of stuff.
yeah. That's funny. Well, since your first time on the podcast, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell us a little bit about how you got started writing.
Yeah, so I've loved writing since I was a little kid and was always writing stories. In fact, I've got a box somewhere downstairs that's got a bunch of stuff I wrote as a middle schooler and high schooler, just laying by my grandparents' pool in the summer with all these story ideas. And I actually went into nonfiction first. So in my day job under my real name, which is Christy Dosh, I am a sports business reporter. And so writing is literally my entire life. It's just a matter of whether I'm writing about sports. And if you guys are watching the video, you can see I've got like sports on this side of my background, and then everything behind me is more of my like beachy
Yeah.
author life. That's because this entire wall that you guys can't see is my set for doing videos for sports and being on TV for the sports related stuff. So I've always written and just got that start in nonfiction because of my day job. I was a corporate attorney before that and did nothing but write contracts all day. So literally every job I've ever had has been based around writing. It's just this side of my writing romance novels, that is newer.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went to law school at one point, and then
And
how did you end up going from that to writing about sports
yeah,
and
so
then now
I
to
was an
romance?
attorney.
Yeah.
I practiced for 5 years. I was a corporate attorney, and like I said, was mostly drafting documents all day. But I worked
Uh-huh.
in commercial mortgage-backed securities. I graduated law school in '07. So by
Ooh, a
'08,
rough time
'09,
to be in.
the
Rough time to
MBS
be in
work
real
was
estate.
crashing the market. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we actually didn't have a lot to do at work every day. I worked at a big law firm in
Uh-huh.
Atlanta, and I had been blogging since kind of, well, before law school even started. I was blogging about applying to law school. So I'm one of those OG bloggers that started blogging in
Ah.
2003,
Oh yeah,
2004.
early.
And first it was my law school experience. And then while I was in law school, I started blogging about legal issues in sports because I'm a huge sports fan. And as
Uh-huh.
our work dried up, we had to be in our office every day, but there was nothing to do. Partners wouldn't pass down work because they wanted to keep it for themselves. And so I sat at my desk and I blogged about legal issues in sports. And I actually ended up getting my first book deal based on a legal journal article I wrote that a partner at my law firm just happened to pass along to someone who knew someone at a publishing house. And I got my first book deal that way while I was still practicing law. And in fact, my second book deal for sports was also while I was still practicing law. So I was kind of
Hmm.
working on those projects on the side. I never thought it would change my career. I actually was one of the lawyers who enjoyed what I did. I moved
Uh-huh.
from CMBS work into historic preservation, which people will find a lot of that in my novels because I did historic preservation and I live in a town with a huge historic district. There are lots of historic properties in my
Yeah.
stories, and that really comes from that time in my life practicing law. And it's a longer story than this, but essentially, after many years of blogging about legal issues in sports, I caught the attention of an agent. And then he happened to mention my name in a meeting at ESPN one day. And next thing I knew, ESPN was offering me a full-time job to be a sports business reporter. That was in 2011. And I've never practiced law again since then.
Isn't that so fascinating? I feel like 90% of careers are kind of that way these days. In comparison, like used to be you'd you're you sell your soul to the company store kind of a thing, and you would that was it. You were there for your entire career and you know, sometimes people still do that, but I feel like so often it's about saying yes to the net, and then so you can say yes to the next gig, and next gig is how like just millennials onward kind of think about work. You know, these,
Yeah.
it's certainly been true with me that I started blogging just to process this horrible experience that I'd had, and then blogging led to YouTube, and YouTube led to the podcast, and podcasting led, and you know, being a film critic, and then now theater critic, and it's just like, you know, one thing kind of, you say yes, and then you have that experience, and then you say yes, and then I don't know, it's just, it's so fascinating
Yeah.
how that seems to be so many people's journeys.
Yeah, and my parents both largely worked at the same company their entire career. In fact, my mom is still there. She's beyond
Yeah,
retirement
yeah,
age and she loves her job so much she still hasn't left yet. And so when I went to my first law firm, I had every intention of staying there
yeah.
forever. Had they not eventually laid me off during the downturn, I even tell them now because I run into them. They do some work in the sports world and I run into them
Uh-huh.
now. And every once in a while, somebody jokes about me coming back and I say, I would have stayed forever, but you let me go. Like, this is your
Right.
fault.
Yeah. So how
So
did
there,
you
at
get
the end of the
so,
day, companies,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, at the end of the day, companies, generally speaking, are not loyal to you. And so I think
Yeah,
over time, people have discovered that their loyalty to their companies, in most cases, are not returned. And so I think there's been a
yeah,
real shift, like you said.
yeah, yeah. Well, how did you get so interested in sports? Like, was that something you did like with your dad or your mom, or how did that all get started?
Yeah, so my mom, who I told you loves her job, she worked at night my whole life. And so it was just me and my dad. My brother is 8.5 years younger than me. So it really was just me and my dad for a long time. And then my brother came along, and my dad was a huge Braves fan. You can see if you're watching, I've got my Braves banner in the background. So I became a
Uh-huh.
big Braves fan. And I was 11 or 12 when they went from worst to first in the early 90s. And
Uh-huh.
I remember that vividly. That was a huge part of my childhood. So I was always a baseball fan. And then I went to law school at University of Florida, which you guys can, if you're watching, can also see in my background. And when I was at University of Florida for law school, they won the football national championship once and basketball twice. And so even though I didn't grow up a Gator fan or even really a college sports fan, it was hard not to get wrapped up in it and become a big college sports fan during that time period. And actually, that is what prompted me to not start my blogging around sports. I started it around baseball, but I made this shift after seeing what happened to the University of Florida after they had this athletic success. And I started writing about the business side of college sports because of seeing that experience firsthand in Gainesville. And that is ultimately what got me the second book deal. And it's what got me the job offer at ESPN and kind of remains my focus today. That is still what I do on
Uh-huh.
the sports side of things, is the business of college sports.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, that there's so much to talk about there. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm totally not that we could, this total tangent, but I'm totally on team they should be compensated. I think it's ridiculous, especially if if their names are being used to sell product. Like, at the very least they should get compensation for that. Like, that's ridiculous to me.
So
Like, I mean, I know people say, well, they get compensated by their education. Sure, but it's ridiculous
and
to me.
that's what I write about and consult about all
Uh,
day long. I'm an
yeah.
expert on what they call name, image, and likeness. And so I've got two more webinars to record later today, and they're both on that topic because that
Yeah.
has become my specialty for the last 4 or 5 years now. It's all I've
Uh-huh.
written or spoken or consulted on, and it
Yeah.
changes on an almost daily basis. I teach two name, image, and likeness classes
Yeah.
actually at University of Florida in journalism and in sports management. And I
Uh-huh.
update the material weekly. Like, I don't release their
Yeah.
stuff for the next module until the last day I have to release it because there's probably a news story coming in that I need to include in there. And
Yeah.
so it's changing really fast. And they're already now able to be compensated for things around their name, image, and likeness. But I think we're very close to them becoming employees or at least
Yeah.
getting some sort of revenue sharing.
Yeah.
So we can do a whole nother
It's
podcast on that.
oh, it's true. I'm not a sports person, but it just doesn't seem right to me that their names can be used to profit and they get nothing, or you know, nothing beyond their scholarships. That just seems crazy to me. Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies. But so your dad was a big Hallmark fan, and had you always been kind of interested in like romance novels and in reading?
Yeah, so I've always been a huge reader. Like I remember having an aunt when I was growing up that would give me a hard time because we did these huge family vacations with my dad's whole side of the family, and we'd be driving down to vacation and I would want to sit in the car and read, and she would give me a hard time because I wasn't talking to her, I was reading. So as long as I can remember, and I've always devoured, I would say, romance, women's fiction, and then I love a good thriller too. And so I kind of mix those categories. I read a fair amount of nonfiction too, but as I started thinking about what I wanted to write, I realized I love Hallmark movies so much. And I write about Hallmark movies as a freelance writer for several publications. And I sort of understood the formula for Hallmark movies. And when Hallmark Publishing had their own imprint, I actually wrote my first manuscript with that as my target. I really wanted Hallmark to be the one to publish my book. And in fact, my last agent, she did submit what is now going to be my second book. She submitted to Hallmark and they turned it down. And funny enough, in the years since, Hallmark dropped the publishing company, and Bryn Donovan, who had been the editor there, she helped me go back and edit that manuscript once she was out freelance editing. And now that will actually become my second published book. So it's not going to be with Hallmark, but I still got to work with Bryn.
Yeah, we love her. She's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible to see what's happening in the romance category right now. I mean, it's basically saving publishing. I mean, it is by far the most successful category right now. And I mean, I'm curious, why do you think that is? Why do you think that romance is having such a moment?
For me, I can only say like my reading taste. I love romance because I want the happy ending. During the pandemic, I watched a lot of Hallmark movies. I did long before that too, but I really binged on Hallmark movies because I just wanted something positive and happy and something where nothing all that bad ever happens. And so it's that escapism, at least for me. And I tend to read closed door sort of romances. I've read other stuff as well, especially when it's authors that I know. I don't have any issue with like a little spice in my book, but I knew that that's not what I felt comfortable writing. And now that it's coming out and I know like my mom and my aunts and my 13-year-old niece are reading my book, I'm glad I went the closed door route so that I feel comfortable with all of them reading it. But I still find myself drawn to romance to get that happy ending and to get that idyllic sort of life that none of us actually live, but it's nice to escape to.
Yeah. I think that we all need hope, and romance is inherently hopeful. So I think that's a big reason, especially, during the pandemic, why we wanted something hopeful.
Yeah. And I think seeing characters be redeemed, like there are bad characters in romance books, but they usually get some sort of redemption arc, and that's really satisfying.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you first say, okay, I'm going to write a novel? So you've done this nonfiction. How did you say, okay, I'm going to give it a shot?
Yeah, so I think for some people, writing is therapy. And the first manuscript I ever wrote was just after the death of someone I dated off and on all through college. And my way to process his passing, and this would have been 2008, 2009. I started trying to write this manuscript, and everybody says the first manuscript you write is very much based on your real life. And that is what happened. I tried to write this fictional account of this relationship that we had as a way to process him very unexpectedly passing. And that has never seen the light of day. I sent, I think, like the first 5 chapters to my agent because I had an agent for my nonfiction already. And she also repped romance. And I sent her like the first 5 chapters. And I remember she broke my heart because she told me that the male love interest wasn't likable. And she didn't know that I had based it on this real person in my life who just died. And now she's telling me how unlikable he is. And it like destroyed me. So I never finished that manuscript. And that's probably for the best. But it was really good therapy for like
Oh,
the year I spent tinkering around with it. And then I put it down and I sort of forgot about fiction because by then I was getting my nonfiction book deals and I was on deadlines for those. And that sort of took over my life. I got that job at ESPN and nonfiction just became more my space. And then 2018, maybe, I've sort of opened up a little bit on that side and had less going on and was able to kind of go back to this idea of writing fiction. And I had always wanted to write a book based on Miranda Lambert's song, The House That Built Me. And small spoiler, that is book number 2 that will be coming out, but it's the first one that I
nice.
wrote. So
Uh-huh.
I wrote this whole book inspired by that song. And we took it out on submission with my old agent in March of 2020, right before the world shut down.
Yeah.
So it was the worst possible timing to take a book out. We just didn't know that at the time. She only sent it to, I think, 6 publishers. So it never actually went on full submission. It went out to 6. I think 5 of the 6 eventually passed. The 6th we never even heard back from. The pandemic was happening. You know, life was blowing up in all sorts of other ways. And so I sort of shelved that. And I was talking to Jenny Hale, who owns Harpeth Road. I had known her on Twitter for years and years and years, had loved her as an author and been conversing with her. And I sent her, I think, that manuscript. And I was talking to her about Harpeth Road. She was getting ready to start it. And I started talking to her about this idea I had for another manuscript I wanted to write. And she really encouraged me to write it and gave me some feedback on the idea. That would have been like December of 2020. And the first book took me 18 months to write. That book took me 45 days to write. And that's the book that's coming out as my debut. Now, it had been through so many edits since then, which is why it's not coming out till 2024. But the first draft, I was so into it. It took me 45 days. And I knew I wanted to publish it with Harpeth Road. I didn't know if Jenny would say yes, but I knew that that's where I wanted to publish it. And so I'm super excited that that is the home that it found.
Well, yeah, we're huge fans of Jenny on this podcast, and I'm just glad that you were able to connect. Like, that's such a blessing. I love what she's doing over there at Harpeth Road. And so, would you consider yourself a pantser or a plotter when you write?
I started as a pure pantser, but the more I write, the more of a plotter I am. And not
Yeah.
so much plotting like scene by scene, but I have found now that what works for me when I have an idea is I write the synopsis first.
Uh-huh.
People hate writing the synopsis. I actually don't mind it.
Yeah.
So I write the synopsis first. It's the beat sheet that gets me. I love spreadsheets and I try so hard to do this beautiful, like color-coded spreadsheet for my beat sheet. Never works out for me. It stresses me out trying to make things like fit in. And Bryn Donovan's actually the one who told me, I think at one point, like, let the beat sheet go. Like, you are trying to fit square pegs into round holes and you're forcing it too much. So now I write the full synopsis and then I sit down and I start writing the first draft. And I
Mm,
pretty much write in chronological
as you
order,
do.
although I will occasionally jot ideas down like this needs to happen later and just make
Uh-huh.
myself a note for it. But I do best when I write scene by scene.
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. I feel like most people, it seems like they say that. Like they start out pantser and then, because you're doing pitches and stuff like that, you need to have some plans the more books
Yeah.
you write.
Well, and
Yeah.
it really helped me out when I was just going back out looking for an agent again. I parted ways with my first agent amicably. We just weren't the right fit for my fiction. And I parted ways, but I also have a new nonfiction project I was querying. And so I was querying my nonfiction project and I would just mention, hey, I also write fiction. I'm under contract already, but I
Uh-huh.
have a work in progress right now that I'm like 75% of the way through. And the agent I
Uh-huh.
ended up with actually asked to see it. And I was like, I have a synopsis and I have, the first however much. So she took the synopsis and I think the first 5 chapters and came back and was like, you know what, I'll represent you for both nonfiction and fiction. And so I ended up signing for both, even though I was really going out to look for nonfiction and I would have taken somebody for just that. But I think having the synopsis already was really helpful to be able to show somebody I've got this story fully formed.
Yeah. So when you're writing, and because you're a big Hallmark fan, do you think, okay, who would be a good Hallmark actor to play the roles?
100%.
Yes.
I actually can't write it if I can't picture the people, and they're always
Uh-huh.
Hallmark actors. And every single manuscript I've written, I have already cast. So
Ah.
this
So
one
I have to
is,
know who were
yeah,
you thinking for Library of Second Chances?
Brennan Elliott as the male lead.
Oh,
And
okay.
that character actually started, the character's not a developer, but he is sort of a city planner that helps cities figure out their development. And I was
Mm-hmm.
originally thinking of Brennan Elliott's character in Cedar Cove, although
Yeah.
not as bad as that
Yeah, I was gonna
character
say not the
was.
villain.
Yeah, not as much as a villain, not quite so devious, but like a little of that sort of energy. And then Emily Ullerup, I loved her in Chesapeake
Oh.
Shores. And at one point, she ran a bookstore on that show, and my character runs a bookstore. And the minute I thought of that character, that's who I pictured. And it's actually when I sent the illustrator my ideas for artwork for like I did fun little stickers and stuff I'm going to give away. I sent Brendan Elliott and Emily Ullerup's photos and was like, these are the actors. These are what I want the people to look like. And so I'm going to try to slip a little fan mail to both of them and send them a copy of the book.
Hey, I think it's brilliant. I wouldn't have thought of them, but hey, I mean, because Brennan, like, he does play a good like real estate guy.
He does.
My favorite is in Kiss at Pine Lake. He's the villain in that one also.
He's a good villain.
And he does. I kind of wish that we could see him again as a villain, but he's so funny in that movie because he's like the big greedy, real estate guy. And he at one point he like steps out of the car. He's like looking at all this forest. He's like, "What is all these trees?"
Yeah. Yeah,
Which
this
is my
character is a
favorite.
little like that.
Hilarious. But yeah, him and Amelia. Sure, why not? Let's do it.
Yeah, that's who I picked. And then as people started leaving Hallmark to go to other networks, and I had cast them in my book, and I very much want all these books to be Hallmark movies. One day I was like, wait a second, you can't leave. I need you for my movie. Come back.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think what was her movie last year that it was Retreat to Something, Retreat to Love or something like that. I
Yes.
loved last year and it was a million times better than I thought it was going to be. Retreat to You. It was called Retreat to You.
That was good.
And
Where
that's
she,
like in the mountains, but I
yeah,
could totally picture her also doing the beachy, setting. And I that movie was so swoon worthy and it was so funny that even though the plot was like ridiculous, I really enjoyed it. So
my
yeah.
book I'm writing right now has some kind of vibes from that movie. When I watched that movie, I was like, wait, like that's
Yes.
got some stuff that overlaps with what I'm doing in one of my works in progress that's about summer camp. So
Uh-huh.
not exactly the kind of retreat they were on, but very much
Yeah.
like that, running into someone before my people are at a summer camp. And I thought, well, I can't cast her for 2 of my books. I got to think of somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good reminder because I want to call those. I mean, I want to email those writers because they were new for Retreat to You, and I really want to get them on the pod because that
I liked
writing
that one.
elevated that one big time.
It was good.
Yeah, it was really good. But let's talk about the Library of Second Chances. So, how did you like develop this idea of like kind of what you wanted to do for the story?
So it all revolves around books that are being left inside of a little free library. And during the
Mhm.
pandemic, I really relied on little free libraries a lot. I live on a small island and we actually have quite a few I think we're like 12 or 13 square miles. I'm on Amelia Island in Florida. And there's a lot of little free libraries, even just in walking distance of me. And I was going around to these little free libraries looking for books. And I noticed that people do some interesting and unique things with their libraries. Like some of them I've seen, they'll have like little seed packets they leave in there, or friendship bracelets, or bookmarks, or sometimes there's more than just books. And also, as I'm standing there looking through the books, there's a lot of titles. I've never heard of the book. I've never heard of the author. And, I read the back cover, but I found myself wishing somebody would tell me why I might like this book. And it occurred to me it might be fun if you actually had a little something you filled out that you left with the book telling people why they might like it.
Yeah.
And so that developed into this idea of, okay, what if these people are leaving notes and they start leaving books back and forth for each other? And I'm a huge You've Got Mail fan. And I know, especially as I talk to student athletes that I work with on the sports side of my business who are younger, if they've seen it at all, which a lot of them haven't, if they've seen it, they hate it. They hate this idea that he's putting her out of business. And so rest assured, my male character is not trying to put the female character out of business. I kind of took that piece out of it, but I wanted that relationship where you're butting heads in real life and there's some reason you don't like each other. And I love a good enemies to lover book. That is my favorite genre to read. And I think it's fun to write because you get like snappy dialogue and you get to be snarky. And I wanted that. And I think Brennan Elliott does a really good snarky, and I was picturing him for it. And so I have them fighting in real life over development in this historic downtown, but they're leaving books for each other in the Little Free Library, and everybody there signs with a different moniker. So they don't know that they're leaving books for each other, and they start to develop this relationship through the recommendations they're making for each other and the notes they're leaving and the things they're writing in the margin of the books. And then of course at some point it has to come to a head and one of them finds out who the other one is, and you'll have to read the book to find out what happens when that comes about. But it was very much inspired by my love of Little Free Libraries and my love of You've Got Mail.
Yeah.
Embark on a delightful journey with the Romance of Rings series by award-winning author Esther Hatch. Discover a world where sweet historical romance meets laugh-out-loud comedy. The first book, Manor for Sale, Baron Included, is free on Kindle from April 25th to 29th. Grab it so you can enjoy Lord Farnsworth's bumbling attempts at wooing the wealthy new owner of his mother's estate. Don't miss the newest release in the series, There Goes the Groom, which is already being hailed as a new favorite Esther Hatch novel. Find out more on this and all of Esther's books at estherhatch.com. That's ESTHERHATCH.com, or use the affiliate link below.
Well, that's interesting. These people that say that they hate because he's trying to put her out of business. And that's the thing, is that you have to appreciate the full character arcs of the story. I mean, the reason why Perfumery as a story, because, of course, Perfumery was the original play, and then The Shop Around the Corner, You've Got Mail. The reason why it just works is the idea of people falling in love over their words and it is just an inherently very attractive idea. Right. And where You've Got Mail, I think, absolutely turns the corner is the scene where she is sick and he brings her flowers. That in that scene, she basically takes down his entire philosophy of The Godfather. He thinks he has this all figured out, that it's just business. It's not personal. And she basically tells him in one brilliant line of dialogue from Nora that, she just says that if anything, it should start out by being personal. And he's kind of like, what? Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And
why
then
she had
from
been
that
successful
moment
in her
on,
business.
From that moment on, his entire trajectory changes and he starts becoming a different person. And that's what you want in good writing. And you want characters to evolve and have an arc. And too often in the romance world, we're for some reason afraid to allow dynamic characters that grow and change. And it's what makes the story work on so many different levels, because they are in love with each other because of their words, but their actions and their life choices and everything have to kind of get them to that point, where they can actually be in love.
I think it's the hardest thing to learn how to write about fiction. Like nonfiction is easy to write. There are facts. There's usually a chronological
Yeah.
order that you're putting things, at least for me, my nonfiction books have been relatively easy. They've been in my area of expertise. When I started writing fiction, the really hard thing for me was the character arc. It's hard to make your characters flawed and make them flawed in
Yeah.
relatable and believable ways. And then you've got to find that way for them to grow. And so I can't remember if it's Gwen Hayes in her Romancing the Beat book or if it's in another craft book I've read, but somebody, I think it's her, talks about your character needs to have this false belief at the beginning. And then you need to
Yes.
start attacking that false belief. And that's exactly what you were just talking about with the characters in You've Got Mail. He has this false belief about business and she attacks it and gets him
Yeah.
past it like that. But I think as a writer, that's a hard time
Yeah.
sometimes to ideate in the
Yeah.
beginning and to figure out who your character is and why do they have that false belief and these like awful things you have to make happen to them in their childhood or in their, recent past that made them this way.
Yeah. That's so true. And the characters are so rich because you think about the not this You've Got Mail episode, although we probably should do that. That would be super fun. But the whole scene where he's talking to his dad and he says they're called readers, Dad. Just don't romanticize them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that and his dad says well, he says to his dad that the one person that you can't get out of your mind and you keep thinking about and you want to spend, whatever, he says something like that, and his dad's like, I've never been with anybody like that. Have you? Ah, that's such a key moment. And he looks up like, what? That's why Nora Ephron was the best. I mean, she was
So good.
the best.
I never get tired of it. I've
Oh
seen
my
it a
gosh.
gazillion times. Can like quote right along with it while I'm watching
Yeah.
it. It's the best. And so when these sad little 20-year-olds tell me they hate it, it just
Yeah.
breaks my heart.
Yeah. No, they'll come around. I believe
Yeah.
that they're just in the beginning of their process. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so this was a really fun story. I really enjoyed it. And so how did you come up with this idea of like, how did you come up with Lucy and Logan as characters? And how did you develop them?
So I knew that I wanted the sort of central conflict to be over development in this historic downtown because that happens
Yeah.
here where I live. That's like one of the
Uh-huh.
biggest debates. In fact, it's happening right now on my island. If you were to read our newspaper, is this debate over what to do with the waterfront. So I knew I wanted it to center around that. And then I sort of knew, okay, then it would make sense for two people who were locking heads in real life to be somebody that was pro-development and somebody that was anti-development, and then sort of figure out. I think I got Logan's character first. I wanted this outsider who didn't understand what it was like to be part of this town. And I don't think this is spoiling anything to say. It turns out Logan actually is from a small town. He just didn't have the same sort of warm, fuzzy feelings about his small town upbringing that Lucy has about growing
Yeah.
up in this town. And so I knew I wanted this outsider because I live in this small town where we talk about outsiders all the time. Like that's a real thing. And I wanted him to come in and have good reasons for why he was pro development. And that it wasn't that he was going to get rich. He wasn't the developer. He's a city planner and he helps cities become, more economically stable, which frankly is something my city needs right now. And so I wanted him to have good reasons why he supported this development, but I wanted her to have equally good reasons why she didn't. And so she's someone who grew up, went away and came back, and she runs one of the businesses downtown. And his development doesn't really threaten her business in the sense of putting her out of business like in You've Got Mail. But she's got her own business struggles that she currently doesn't have the skills to overcome. But guess what? He does because, his skill set is so very different from hers. And so the more I kind of thought about why these two people would be repelled from each other, but why they would also start coming together,
Yeah.
it came to me and seemed like the logical fit.
So how did you come up with Island Girl and Gatsby's Ghost as their letter writing names?
Gatsby's Ghost was his name from day one. It never changed. I love the 1920s. I love Great Gatsby. I love all that imagery. And just before I started writing this, I had read Z, The Beginning of Everything, about Zelda Fitzgerald. And I love that book. I have now read or listened to it, I think 3 or 4 times. They did a mini series based on the book. I've watched that a couple of times. And so I wanted that to be one of the books that one of them left for the other one that sort of sparked this conversation with each other. And so his name was the same from the beginning. Her name changed probably 4 or 5 different times. I wish I could even remember what some of the early ones were, but actually feedback that I got from beta readers and from a developmental editor that I worked with was that her name just wasn't working. Hers was also something, gosh, I wish I could remember it, but it was also something sort of based in that era. And they just felt like she needed to have a name that was more tied to her community and how much she loved living in this little town and how much she loved living at the beach, and just to hammer home that beach read, this is a summer book sort of thing. And so she eventually became Island Girl.
So we should say that basically what happens is they start communicating through this little library.
Yep.
Starts with a book recommendation that she leaves, and then it's kind of like if people have read /seen Dash and Lily, which was a great little Netflix show. It's kind of similar in idea as that.
Yeah, so I can't remember who leaves who a book first, but I think she leaves something that he picks up, and then he comes back and he addresses something directly to her, and that's something that doesn't normally happen in that little free library. Like, you leave a little index card saying, here's why I think you would like this book, but you don't leave it for someone specific. And so when the book opens, her best friend, Taylor, is actually trying to convince her, like, there's something here. He is leaving books addressed to you. This is not normal. This is not what normally happens in this little free library. And they start leaving those back and forth to each other. And because she owns a bookstore, she's a voracious reader and has access to a lot of books, but it's him that starts leaving her books to sort of help her with things she's identified in her letters that she's struggling with. It starts with sort of lighthearted fictional reads, and then it moves into some nonfiction and memoir. And I was really lucky that I got permission to use a real book that was so important for me to use. I love Mel Robbins, and I really wanted him to leave Lucy the 5-second rule, because Lucy's not good at making decisions. And I know a lot of people like this in my life, and I'm certainly like that sometimes, but Lucy is not at all an biographical character. She's very different than me, but she's based on people I know. And I so badly wanted that to be one of the books. And one of my early reviews that I've gotten from an ARC reader said that she'd already ordered Mel's book. And that made me so happy that someone did see themselves in Lucy, and Lucy has this profound change after she reads this book. And now this person who read my book wants to go read that book. That was such a cool moment.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that other people feel that way.
That's awesome. Was it a challenge writing the actual notes, the actual letters, and making them kind of feel different than the rest of the text?
So hard. They changed so many times.
Yeah.
The early edition, some of the early feedback that I got on why this book didn't work, both from my former agent and from some beta readers, was that the notes didn't show enough growing affection between them. And I found it really hard to add in, because I didn't want the notes to be too long. I wanted them to realistically fit on a index card, so they couldn't be too long. But these people don't know each other, really. They only know each other through the books they're reading and suggesting. So I rewrote those, I can't even tell you how many times. And I had originally put all real books in there, and then we ended up not being able to get the rights to use quotes from some of the books. It was either the publisher didn't get back to us, or they didn't grant us permission to use the quotes. And so I then had to make up fake books, and that was even harder. Making up fake, you would think that would be easier because you could make it anything you want it to be.
Yeah.
But I thought I had picked the perfect books, and when I had to take them out and had to make fake ones, it was so hard.
Yeah, I believe it. That makes sense to me.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/hallmarkies.
One of the things that I think is absolutely key in especially closed door romance is developing a sense of touch early on within the narrative. And it builds chemistry so palpably. And I thought that this was a really good example. Forgive me if I read. I really liked this scene where he says that who his eyes kept returning to the woman who'd found such joy in telling him about the history of the bay window earlier, who'd been so flustered after the encounter with the skateboarder that she lost her shoe as she stepped off the curb. He'd felt a spark in the brief moment he touched her, pulling her away from his chest so he could see if she was all right. Had she felt it too? Even if she had, his charm was clearly lost on her now. So I think that is such a good little paragraph there. Like you've got the moment you're in his head, you're a little bit in her head, and so what was that? Was that important to you? Was that something you thought about? Is developing that and how and just what was that like writing that?
Yeah, I would say that's something I was not good at in the first draft either. That got a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
I entered the Kiss Pitch mentorship. I guess that would have been in 2022, and had an amazing mentor, Jessica Leppy, who her debut just came out earlier this year, and is also a take on You've Got Mail, which is why she picked me for the mentorship, because she was like, "Wait, I know how to do this," because she had just gotten her book deal. For hers is called Flirty Little Secret, and she was able to help me fix a lot of things where she had gotten feedback on her book on things that did and didn't work. And growing that, hers is a little spicier than mine is. So she was able to do this differently than me, but helping me figure out how to grow that. And I found myself as I read widely in my own genre, and I don't know how authors don't do that. Like anyone who writes in a genre that they don't read, I do not understand, because it's not that I'm, taking things from other people. Some people say they don't want to read it because they don't want that voice in their head and they accidentally plagiarize somebody. I'm never worried about that, but I see the mechanics of how does somebody build that. And I started making notes to myself as I was reading books about how, as a reader, somebody started to make me feel this attraction between them and have them have me rooting for them to have this future physical relationship. And, it's really by reading widely that I think I got better at it.
Yeah.
And I think with every book I've gotten better. I think the one I'm writing right now, I'm even better at it than I was in this one.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes something that Hallmark can forget is to have those like little moments of connection and little moments of touch early on. And I think a lot of the most popular Hallmark movies, they nail that. And it really helps build the chemistry so that you are invested in this couple.
Well, now that I'm thinking about it, that you read, he's kind of looking back on their very first encounter where she ends up getting shoved into him because of a rogue skateboarder on the sidewalk. And that got added after I worked with my mentor, because originally they always met on the sidewalk and they had this conversation, and you're in her head during that scene because this is a dual POV book. So you're in her head and she's so attracted to him. He's so good looking. And, then she gets shoved into him. Well, the getting shoved into him came from my mentor. She was like, you need to have them touch in this first meeting. I'm like, they just met each other, so then it sort of had to be this accidental touch that happened. So props to her, because I'm pretty sure she's the one who got me to add that.
Well, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then this is another, I thought, really good scene where it says here, I like this. And he says that his professional ambitions aside, though, there was no denying he was heartbreakingly handsome. If a woman was into chiseled jawlines and dazzlingly green eyes, of course, taking deep breaths, she busied herself with getting the coffee started, then poured the cats more water and reorganized a shelf, feeling let's see, anything to keep her hormones from overtaking her brain. Logan Lancaster was off limits.
Yeah,
That
and
was a good
again,
one
like
too.
he's Brennan Elliott, which
Yeah.
I'm married. Brennan Elliott's married, but I think we can all agree Brennan Elliott's a pretty good-looking guy. Although he does not have the kind of green eyes that I gave this character. I wanted to tweak
Yeah.
him and make him a little bit different. And when we were working on the illustration for these stickers and bookmarks I wanted to do, I sent Brennan's picture, but I was like, I want him to have like crazy green eyes. Like I
Yeah.
want them to be so mesmerizing. And the illustrator nailed it. The green eyes
Yeah.
like leap off every time I use that image in a graphic.
Yeah. Well, I think even though he has blue eyes, I think the perfect casting would be Kevin McGarry, because his eyes are like
I like him.
so blue, like wow, and he's
He's
so
a favorite
handsome.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're
Honestly,
all
I'll let
handsome, of course.
Hallmark can cast whoever they want if they'll just make this into a movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this screams Hallmark. Are you kidding me?
But I think
The
I told you as we were emailing back and forth, there are two Hallmark movies that to me remind me of You've Got Mail that I watched over and over and over when I was writing this.
Oh,
Not
really?
that I wanted to steal any of the ideas, but just to like keep me in this headspace
Yeah,
about how they were making this connection without it being in person. And in Bottled with Love, it starts out with like a note in a bottle, and then I think they're texting or emailing back and forth. And then My Secret Valentine, they're writing on a chalkboard in a
yeah,
rental house. And I
yeah.
watched those movies so many times just trying to figure out how do you build that attraction when you're just leaving these short little notes to each other.
I guess well, I like Bottled with Love quite a bit. I don't love My Secret Valentine, and the reason why is because it's not that, because all these stories, they are enemies in real life, right? But the thing about it in that one is that her dislike of him was not reasonable. Like it did not
Yeah,
make sense. He had literally spent the entire day helping her, and then she'd come home and be like, "Oh, this annoying guy." Like, what?
yeah,
And so, whereas like the dislike by Kathleen Kelly of Joe Fox is totally reasonable, right?
right.
And these other enemies to lovers, it's reasonable. It makes sense. And that's what annoyed me about that book. I'm like, he's literally been helping you the entire day. He's like getting you all these deals,
Well,
and schmoozing all these people, and oh, this annoying guy, he won't leave me alone. I'm like, what about?
what's funny is it's Andrew Walker in both movies.
Yeah, and of course
So it's
he's like,
like maybe
he's
he has to be Logan because he's the only one allowed to do these You've Got Mail takes.
I mean, and he's like super charming, and so of course, but I was just, that's the key difference to me between when this kind of story works and when it doesn't, is the hatred in the enemies to lovers, the enemies part of it, is it reasonable? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, for the most part, I think the dislike of between Lucy and Logan is reasonable, because she never really hates him that much. She's always like, yeah, he's pretty handsome, he's pretty nice, but wish he didn't have this job.
She is admittedly unreasonable about some of the things he's
Yeah,
proposing for the waterfront. And actually, I toned it way
right.
down because some of my early feedback was that she was too unreasonable. And a lot of the arguments she makes, and even a lot of the arguments the townspeople make when they're in these council meetings, they're taken from actual meetings here on the island where I live and like real
Yeah,
things people say. And I would get this early feedback that would be like, why would anyone ever think this way? And it's like, you want me to send you a newspaper article? Like, this is happening in my town, and this is how people are reacting to it. But I understand not everybody lives here, not everybody thinks that kind of stuff is realistic. And so I toned that way
yeah,
down. But if you read it and you're thinking about these like small town politics, just know like that stuff was all inspired by real conversations here.
yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of times when I do see like Save the Store, Save the Farm in a Hallmark movie, I'll be like, ugh, because there's no stakes. There's no chance that they're actually going to lose the store, lose the farm, lose the whatever. And that's the thing about You've Got Mail is she loses the store. Like,
Yeah.
and she has to grow and evolve as a person, right?
Yeah.
And she even says at the end, she says that I would never have become an editor. I would never have done this if it wasn't for what happened.
Yeah.
And so it can be done well, and it can be good, but I do think that's why there's some like resistance from people of like, oh no, this plot again, this save
Yeah.
because it's often done not well.
Which is why I
But
didn't want her store to be in danger. I knew from the very
yeah,
beginning, I never wanted her bookstore to be in danger. The development will affect the downtown character, but
right.
it's not going to force the closure of her store. And I never wanted her store to be in danger because that did feel like, okay, this is what happens in every single
Yeah,
story like this.
right. I also like the fact that you made her a Hallmark fan. You made Lucy.
Yes.
That was fun. Like
Well, and I ended
throughout.
up mentioning You've Got Mail, and like I went back and forth
Yes.
on whether that was a little too on the nose, but actually then everyone who read it after that liked it, so I ended up keeping it in there.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And you talk about she watched too many Hallmark movies and and he didn't want her to get romantic ideas. And then later on she talks about watching sappy Hallmark movies with her friends. So yeah, I
Look,
like
I
that.
love Hallmark.
Yeah,
I will
yeah.
watch any and everything they put out. I don't love them all, but I will watch them all.
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, very good. Congrats on the book. I did enjoy it. I thought it was a really cute story. I liked the two leads and the dynamic. I liked the letters. It was just a lot of fun. So, so we like to end our interviews with some fun get to know you questions. And the first one is, what is the best ice cream flavor?
Oh, I don't know what it's called, but on our ice cream shop here on the island, we have one that's raspberry and then it has these little chocolate cups in it. And I forget exactly what I think it's called, raspberry haze or something like that. It's so good. I love
Mm,
the mix of the fruity and the chocolate.
okay. What's your favorite color?
Teal.
Nice. What music are you into?
I mostly listen to country, but country and Taylor Swift.
Okay. Good. What's your go-to date night food?
Pizza. My husband and I
Mm.
eat a lot of pizza.
Oh, good. What's your go-to date night activity if you're going out doing something?
Oh, we're not great about that. I'm not gonna lie. It's
Ugh.
probably just going out for a nice dinner and walking around either our downtown or out on the beach. So lucky to live in a place that used to be my vacation destination.
Oh, so jealous. So jealous. I'm in a landlocked state. Uh, so which do you like better, dogs or cats?
Oh, we have both. And as a matter of fact, my German Shepherd is snoring at my feet. Hopefully, the microphone is not picking up her snoring. And then we have three cats. So, or
Ah,
choose.
wow. Which do you like better, beaches or mountains?
That answer has changed since I moved to the beach. I would have said beach until I lived here, but now that I live here, I only take mountain vacations.
What's your favorite holiday to celebrate?
Christmas. My birthday is 5 days before Christmas, so I am a big Christmas
Oh,
person.
yeah. All right. And last question, what is your favorite Hallmark or romantic movie?
Oh, that's so hard. There's
I
so many
know.
good
It's really
ones.
tough.
Um, my favorite one, and now this is going to sound like it's not my favorite because the name has flown right out of my head. My favorite one, though, is a Christmas one, and it's about a writer that goes to a writer's workshop right before
Oh,
Christmas and runs
the
into her ex-boyfriend.
yeah, Mistletoe Inn.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That one's
I
so
have
good.
watched that one so many times. And actually, I don't think very many other people like it
Yeah.
based on the feedback I've gotten when I have shared that previously.
No, I like it. And one of my favorite parts about that movie is just totally random, but I think it's hilarious, is they have all of these uh specialty cocktails, right?
Yes.
And at the inn, and one of them is called the Tiny Tim,
Mm.
which I
I
just
love
think is
that. And
hilarious. Why would you name your alcoholic beverage after a child? Tiny Tim, no less.
for whatever
I
reason,
think
I
that's
just
so
love that
funny.
movie. They hardly
Yeah,
ever replay it anymore. It is saved on
yeah.
my DVR, and it is one of the reasons I've had trouble cutting cable is because I will lose that movie. And it is not available. Last time I checked, it was like not available anywhere.
Yeah, that one is it. Well, and they have such like a good meet. It has a lot of the tropes, but does it
Yeah.
really well. Like when of course, you got the spilled coffee, slip on ice, meet cute, and that whole scene with the snowman is so
Yes.
cute. Yeah.
What's the one that came out this past like fall season with the haunted house? You have much better
Oh
recall.
yeah.
Terrible with
The
names.
what is it? Yeah, the one with Chris McNally and Julie. Yeah,
Yes,
two ghosts,
loved that one.
two something like that. Two stories, two ghosts. I don't know, something
Yes,
like
something
that.
like I loved that one too. I think that's probably
Yeah.
a contender for my favorite. Mhm.
Yeah, that one was fun. Well, very good. You did it. You answered all the questions.
Thank you so much. This was fun.
Yeah, it was a blast. And so people want to pick up the book. When does it come out?
May 7th. I have
May
been counting down
7th.
the day for over a year. So it's so exciting to finally have it upon us.
That's awesome. Well, we'll have a link, affiliate link in the description. You all should definitely check it out. And thanks again for coming to talk with us. And if people want to follow you on socials, how do they do that?
I am Savvy Carlisle on almost all of them with 2 V's. Savannah Carlisle didn't fit, I think, on Twitter. So then it was like I wanted them all to match. So they're all Savvy Carlisle. And I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the things.
Great. Well, very good. Well, thanks so much. And you did it. We did it. I'd like to thank Savannah for coming on the podcast. This was a blast. I really enjoyed this interview. I hope you all did too. Let me know what you think if you get to read the book and what you think of all the different things we talked about. I'd love to hear that. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, make sure you're following the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. We so appreciate that. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Appreciate that so much. We also have the Patreon group and merch store. And so please take a look at that. And thanks so much. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye.